Man, if I would have just known these things about the M50 before I bought it, it would have saved me a lot of time and money. Welcome to Fulan Creative YouTube channel, where we do gear reviews, tips, tricks, and how-tos for creative professionals and entrepreneurs. So the first thing that I wish I would have known about was the Canon EOS remote app. So let's say you're in the studio, right, and you need to shoot a thumbnail or something like that. Well, instead of setting the camera on the timer for 10 seconds and then running back over there and doing your crazy looking YouTube pose and all of that, instead you can just use this app to take as many pictures you want. And it's super handy for video recording as well. Instead of having to walk over there to hit record, walking back over there to change the settings, etc., you could just sit down in front of the camera and control all of that with this app. It's so useful that I'd be willing to pay for it, but thank God it's free. I'll leave a link down in the description where you can download it. The next thing I wish I would have known about was this cheap dummy battery that you could get off of Amazon. So if we take a look at the bottom of our M50, where the battery door is, what you're gonna notice is that there's this other little door and it has a small hole which is for the dummy battery. Now the reason that this is so useful is because to take your M50 on and off of your tripod, you're gonna need an Arca Swiss plate or some other type of plate. But due to the size of the M50 and the way that it was designed, once you put that plate on there, you can't open and close the battery compartment anymore. Now if you're gonna be doing some recording in your studio and your battery runs out, you're gonna have to take the camera off of the tripod, take off the plate to be able to switch out the battery, and then you're gonna have to put your camera back on the tripod and reframe your shot. And if you don't get the same exact framing or something changes, sometimes it can mess up your video. So what you would do is put in that dummy battery, and then you could just plug that dummy battery to the wall through that little hole on the bottom of the battery compartment. And this way you don't have to worry about switching out batteries in the middle of recording, because every time you're recording a video inside the studio, you can just use the dummy battery and let your actual batteries charge, and only use those when you take the camera outside of the studio. Now if you watched any of my previous videos, then you're probably familiar with the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is cine style. But what you may not know about it is that you can also use it for photos. So when you're taking photos, the difference between shooting JPEG and shooting RAW is that the RAW file has so much more data, so that you have more leeway in manipulating the colors and playing with the exposure, etc. But one of the other important differences between a JPEG and a RAW file is that the RAW file is much bigger. So let's say you're out there filming, you already got a bunch of stuff on your SD card and you don't have that much more space. What you can do is shoot JPEG instead, but put it on a cine style profile, which is gonna boost your dynamic range, and being that it's a flat profile, it's gonna be a lot easier to color grade. Now if you don't already have cine style, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can download it. It's also free. Now this next one is a big one, and what that is that the EFM line of lenses are pretty much dead. Canon was hardly making any lenses for this mount, even when it was its main APS-C mount. And now that they released the R10 and the R7, which are APS-C cameras that use the RF mount, then I'm pretty sure that they're not going to be making any more EFM lenses at all. But it's not any issue at all, because you can just buy a $40 adapter which lets you use EF and EFS lenses on your M50, and this is going to give you a whole bunch of high quality lenses to choose from, and you'll also be able to use them with the R10 and the R7, and you can even use it on Canon's full frame cameras as well, like I'm doing now on the EOS R. The only reason I could see to still buy EFM lenses would be how small and lightweight they are. And if you choose to go that route, then in my opinion, the best lens is the Canon 32mm f1.4. And if you want a super cheap and super small lens that's still pretty fast at f2, then this 22mm pancake lens is also an option. But for me personally, the size and the weight advantage aren't really that important. I don't mind heavy lenses, and one of the best lenses that I have is this Sigma 18-35 APS-C lens. It's slightly more pricey than the EFM lenses that I mentioned earlier, but it's worth every penny, because this is probably the best APS-C zoom lens ever made, and it's sharper than many prime lenses, even when you shoot wide open. I'll leave a link in the description to all these lenses, plus the adapter that you need. Now, two other pieces of gear that are also worth mentioning are the Viltrox Speed Booster and the COMLIGHT Drop-In ND Filter. The Speed Booster is gonna pretty much give your M50 a field of view that's closer to a full frame camera, and it's gonna give you an extra stop of light and aperture on all your lenses. But take note that the Speed Booster only works with full frame EF lenses, and it doesn't work with APS-C EFS lenses. And the COMLIGHT Drop-In ND Filter serves as an adapter where you can use EFS lenses and EF lenses, while at the same time giving you a variable ND so that you could shoot outside without your highlights being blown out. Now, the last thing I wish I knew before I bought the Canon M50 is that Sony was going to be releasing the ZV-E10. Now, I still believe that for many people, the M50 is a better choice than the ZV-E10, mainly because for the casual video shooter or photographer, or for the person who just wants to shoot a few videos for their business, the M50 is going to give you amazing results, and it's a lot easier to use than the ZV-E10. You don't have to fiddle around with the colors as much, and you pretty much get an amazing looking image straight out of the camera. But if you want to shoot long form content where you don't have to keep hitting the record button every 30 minutes like you do on the M50, then the ZV-E10 is an amazing option because it doesn't have a record limit and it has a few other interesting features that the M50 doesn't have. Now, if you haven't purchased the M50 yet and you're trying to make up your mind between the M50 Mark II, the ZV-E10, or the EOS R10, then I would highly suggest that you watch this video right here where I compare the ZV-E10 against the Canon M50. Or if you're a diehard Canon fan like me, then I suggest you will watch this video right here where I compare the M50 against the EOS R10. It's your boy Fulan and I'm out. Peace. Whoops, that didn't work.